So I've had the opportunity of witnessing a schism within a political community, a community of people with political interests, I guess. So there's obviously a podcast that I like, or I guess it's more of a YouTube channel, or it's 3 different YouTube channels. I can never tell what the hell they're doing at any given moment, but it's Deep Fat Fried, and they have a subreddit called Deep Fat Fried. It's the Amazing Atheist, his brother, and Paul's Ego, who is another guy from the really old school atheist days on YouTube. But there's an interesting kind of ideological schism that's happening in that community, and it's really focused around 2 different people. And one of them is Paul's Ego, and the other is not even a part of Deep Fat Fried. His name is Vosh, and it seems like half the community, or maybe like 2/3 of the community on the subreddit, is on Vosh's side, and 1/3 is on Paul's side. But it seems like Paul has been attracting a lot more adherents to his side of the schism lately, including the Amazing Atheist, who used to be a little bit more on Vosh's side, but he's kind of shifted into being on Paul's side. And so what's the nature of the schism? Well, it's actually twofold. So the first issue is voting, because I guess people really, for some reason, give a fuck what you vote for. I guess it kind of makes sense because, you know, people want you to do what they want you to do, you know? They don't want you to do what they don't want you to do, for sure. But it's weird how much animosity there is over this issue, because it seems like they both agree on the same premises of, like, okay, we want communism in America, basically. But they have 2 different ways of approaching the voting issue, and that is what divides them, and then they get really frustrated over that. Like, why won't you agree with me? I mean, you guys have the same goals, so I don't think it really matters. I mean, it's a question of strategy, and one person has one idea, another person has another idea. I don't think we need to throw a big fucking fit over it. But what's the deal? Well, Vosh is basically a social democrat. He calls himself an anarcho-syndicalist, but he's essentially a social democrat when you get down to it. And so he's not very radical in his positions. Everything to him is reform-minded, and it doesn't seem like he really cares that much about the sort of revolutionary mission that he claims to support as an anarcho-syndicalist, which is fine. I mean, you can have 2 different ideas. You can have the revolutionary idea and the reformist idea. I don't think they need to be totally divorced from each other. But it does seem like Vosh lately has been, like, very reform-minded and kind of scoffing at the whole revolution thing, which, I mean, I can't blame him, because the whole, like, revolutionary ideologies are kind of dumb. I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of dumb. But they're also there's also a way in which you can see that reformist ideologies are dumb too. It really depends on how you look at the situation, because like, reform is very incremental, very slow, and often feels like nothing's happening. And for a lot of people, that's just not acceptable. But revolution is very violent and destabilizing, and could have some pretty nasty results. And so for a lot of people, that's just not feasible. And also, like, a revolution requires certain conditions, certain psychological conditions existing in a population for it to work. And it can be difficult to look at that situation and think, well, how do we actually achieve those conditions? And so there's kind of a catch-22 no matter what you pick. Neither side is really very great. And yet they both think they're so fucking awesome, don't they? They both think that they're like fucking, they figured it out. Oh yeah, I'm such a fucking genius. I figured it out. It's reform. That's the tactic we need to push for. Or it's revolution. All right, guys. Yeah, Vosh. So Vosh, as a social democrat, believes that we should vote blue no matter who. We should vote for Democrats, Democratic Party all the way, because they're slightly better than the Republican Party. And, well, Paul disagrees, and as far as I know, Paul has never called himself an anarcho-syndicalist or anything. He's just a guy with ideas, which I kind of prefer that method. But Paul is like, no, we don't need to be voting for Democrats because that's just, you know, it's not really going to help in the long run. What we need is, well, a syndicalist movement. We need direct action. And we need a third party that will support that syndicalist movement and build that from the ground up. And my thing about third parties is I don't think that they're viable under the current voting system, and so I don't think there's any point in chasing after them. Although, I do think that it, you know, like if you really want to do that, if you really think that's the right decision, I'm not going to stand in your way, because I think that the people who want that have valid reasons. I just personally don't see it as viable because I think that the current voting system we have enforces a two-party alignment. But we're working on changing that. I mean, I made a whole video in the last election talking about my frustration over the fact that Nevada only barely passed the ranked choice vote, and we're gonna have to do it again next year to get it into the Constitution. And I'm so fucking terrified that those bastards, who are they? Battleborn Progress, I think, is one of them. The senators, both the senators we have, Jackie Rosen and Catherine Cortez Masto, both of whom I voted for, Mark Amadei, a bunch of other people are against it. There's only like one or two unions and organizations who actually support it, even though they're fucking morons for not supporting it, because it's like, you know, the voting system is the beating heart of the democratic institution that we are a part of, and so if you don't have a strong voting system, then you're just committing yourself to failure. But anyway, that's the voting issue, is that Paul thinks that it's like wrong to vote Democrat, and he's like strongly against it, and then Vosh thinks that it's wrong not to vote Democrat, and he's strongly against that. So these guys have the same political opinions, and yet they for some reason feel the need to get at each other's throats over the issue of voting. More so Paul than Vosh. Vosh doesn't seem to really care about them. Vosh has bigger fish to fry when it comes to that issue, but he does talk about that issue a lot, and he doesn't seem to really care about it. But it's really the fans, it's the fan base where the schism is developing. So that's one half of the schism, but then the other half of the schism between Paul and Vosh fans is the issue of Ukraine. Yeah, Ukraine became a big sticking point for them because Vosh is very pro-war. He wants to support Ukraine in the war. He wants Ukraine to fight the war. He wants to beat Russia because he thinks that the diplomatic consequences of a Russian victory or even a Russian settlement that settles even remotely in their favor is just unconscionable and a threat to global security, which is true. You know, that's true. And then Paul is against war. He's entirely anti-war, which means he doesn't even want to fight it out. He wants to immediately create a settlement, basically do whatever is possible to stop the war, even if it means conceding some things to Russia. And recently, it looks like because of the whole Israel-Palestine conflict, Joe Biden started work on negotiating a truce between Russia and Ukraine. And Paul has just been having a field day from that. He feels all vindicated. Like, see, we could have not wasted all those lives and all that time fighting this war that will never be won. Because that's another one of his contentions, is that, you know, the people who agree with Vosh think that Ukraine can definitely beat Russia. And they're very optimistic about that. Paul is a lot more pessimistic, and he thinks that there's no way Ukraine can beat Russia. And so they're wasting their time. They're wasting a lot of lives. And they're dragging out this kind of stalemate conflict, which is, you know, a real decadent kind of war that I think a lot of people despise these days. It's really a modern phenomenon, that the endless war. You know, gone are the days when you could win a fucking war, you know? And so I get his frustration. I think he's a little bit too quick to feel vindicated by the fact that there's peace talks happening or negotiations starting. I think that's a little quick. But, you know, it will be the case that, you know, if a settlement is reached and Russia gets something out of the deal, like Crimea, for instance, yeah, he will be vindicated. He'll be totally vindicated because this whole war could have been avoided. Or that's one way of looking at it, but, you know, who really knows? You know, that's the thing, is nobody really knows what's going to happen. And so I think I think obsessing over your vindication is kind of silly, because you could always be wrong about the future. Just because you happen to be right doesn't mean that people should have listened to you. But that's what's going on, is the people who agree with Paul on voting tend to also agree with him on Ukraine, and the people who agree with Vosh on voting tend to also agree with Vosh on Ukraine. And so there's a great schism happening. And I think, you know, Paul likes to kind of portray it as, I'm an old man, I've seen stuff, I've been through this before, I lived through the Bush administration as an adult. And so he has a perspective on politics where it's like he's seen the same things play out time and time again. Vosh is a lot younger. And so I think Paul doesn't respect Vosh's opinion because Vosh is so much younger, and it doesn't seem like he has that context for understanding politics the way he does. But Vosh, with his with his very practical mind, just cannot see Paul's opinion as anything other than just idle, childish nonsense. Because, you know, what's Paul actually going to be doing to make the world a better place? You know, he's promoting this idea of the syndicalist movement, but, you know, is Paul out there organizing? Is Paul out there creating a third party? What is Paul actually going to do? So you can chit-chat all you want, but unless anyone in the world is actually going to do something, then you might as well vote blue, because at least that will be doing the bare minimum. So there's two different ways to look at it. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I just find it interesting that other people feel like they have to have an opinion one way or the other. Other people feel like they really need to care about who's correct. I think that they're both correct, and they just have different ways of looking at the situation. And so, you know, I don't think we need to worry ourselves over that. Let's focus on things that we actually can solve together, you know? The issues that don't put us at an impasse. That's all I have to say about that. This is VEDN Day 26. See you tomorrow for VEDN Day 27.